Leading with Gratitude Live. I'm your host, Chester Elton, the Apostle of Appreciation, coming to you from the Gratitude Virus epicenter of the planet, Summit, New Jersey. You know, we say, give us 30 minutes, we'll give you great information, great inspiration, and a personal roadmap to develop a life of gratitude at work and at home. You know, we're broadcasting on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and all brought to you by the wonderful people at the Methods Network. Well, I can't tell you how excited I am to introduce to you my dear friend, Dr. Terrence Jackson, who's joining us today. Let me give you a little bit of Terry's background and a little bit of his bio. Terry is the author of Transformational Thinking, the first step toward individual and organizational greatness. He has also contributed articles to Forbes, Chief Executive Magazine, and has authored more than 150 articles on LinkedIn. He is the CEO of GxG Consulting that consults with misaligned organizations. Today, we'll be discussing some of the most important issues of our time on leadership, culture, and race relations. I can't tell you how excited I am to introduce to you my good and dear friend, Dr. Terry Jackson. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thank you so very much, Chester. It's an honor, and I'm humbled to be here. I'm with the Apostle of Appreciation.
We're going to have more fun than humans should be allowed. Hey, we have got a treat for you today. We have got Christy Lawrence in the Question Command Center coming to you live and in color from Atlanta, Georgia, sipping on her sweet tea in her backyard. So as you get some questions that come up, she's going to curate those. There she is. Wave to the crowd. Going to be fun today. Well, listen, Terry, tell us a little bit about yourself and what transformational thinking in an organization is all about. Our listeners are eager to learn more about you.
Well, as you said earlier, Chester, I work with misaligned organizations and misaligned individuals who are within organizations. And so that's really about transformation. And I like to use the analogy of the caterpillar to the butterfly, because the caterpillar to the butterfly, the butterfly never becomes a caterpillar again. And oftentimes we use the word change and transformation as they're synonymous, and they're not. I'll give you an example. Change. If you decide that you're going to lose 15 pounds and you lose the 15 pounds, but a year later you gain it back, that's because the transformation didn't take place. So that change was reversed. That's because you didn't put in the necessary infrastructure to support a lifestyle change. That's what transformation actually is. It's a lifestyle change. So you put in the necessary infrastructure around your dietary regimen, your exercise regimen, so that you can maintain it. And you also make, most importantly, the change in the mindset of how you go about living so that you can sustain that. Transformation is really about beginning today, creating a new future. Change is about the past and how you can make something better. So I am a titan of transformation.
And tell us a little bit, how did you get into this work? You've got such an interesting background. What led you to be so passionate about this transformational thinking?
Well, you know, probably back in the early part of 2000, I was in a different type of business, and I began to look at myself in the mirror, and I didn't like what I saw. And so I said, well, you know what? I need to transform. So I began going through the work, the inner work of what it would mean for me to become a different individual. You know, the outer looks the same, but the inner is what needs to change. I also began to do a lot of reading and studying and researching around transformation. And at that time, when I sold my business, I ended up going back into corporate America. And as I learned all of this, I decided that if I can use these tools with myself, how can I use them with the team that I was commanding at that time? I ran a division of a firm. So I began to slowly but surely implement some of the tools that I used around transformation for myself. And I began to see that there was a great deal of success. You know, running a division of a firm for 5 years, we never missed a number. And in not missing that number, you know, I saw that it was working. And then all of a sudden, my peers from around the country were asking me, what are you doing? And I said, well, you know what? I'm treating human beings as they should be treated. And so I'm proof positive of transformation in my life. And so I began to carry it into organizations and work with them. And again, it's a journey. It's definitely not just a destination. And as a result of that, when you're talking about transformation, there's a lot of work that is done at the individual level, at the organizational level, where they know they're never going to go back to what they were.
Excellent. So, everything's upside down, right? We got a pandemic. We got all kinds of social issues. What's the main thing you're coaching leaders on today?
I'm coaching leaders today to look into the future, because you just mentioned the pandemic. We're never going back to who we were as a country. We're never going back to who we were as a globe, because the way that we engage with clients, with employees, is going to totally be different. And so when I talk to them, I talk to them and I give the example of Picasso. Picasso is he was the artist. And right now, as a leader of an organization, you pretty much have a clean canvas that you put the paintbrush in your hand and you begin to paint the picture of the future that you would like. I also like to utilize an acronym in this transformation called ADAPT, and that is to anticipate, drive, accelerate, partner, and trust. And trust is what ties all of this together. So looking toward the future, creating the new future, because today will be just the past tomorrow. And you always have to look forward as you're looking to create new environments and new modes of generating revenue and new products for your organization and for your clients.
Excellent. Listen, I know a lot of you that are listening in, you're going through transformation at work, whether it's you're working from home or developing these new products. We got one of the great transformational thinkers on the planet here. So put your questions in the chat box and we'll get to them straight away from our question command center in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Terry, you've been at the forefront of a lot of social issues right now. And I know that's a big transformation as to how people talk to each other and understand each other's stories. So you're a great coach. I'm an older white guy. We're in this social, transformation. Coach me up. What are some of the things I can do in my position to be part of the solution and not perpetuate more of the systemic problems?
First thing I do is ask you to take a look at yourself and ask you, how do you or why do you see me different than you see yourself? And then I begin to talk about being human. Because being human is understanding that the hue of my skin and the hue of your skin is dictated based on a biological function. It has a biological function given where you're located or where your ancestors were located on the globe at that time. It's pure and simple. It has to do with how we function versus our relationship to the sun or not to the sun. And that's a biological function. So all of the myths that have been created around this thing called race, all of the narratives or the false narratives that have been created, when you look at a person as a human being, it enables you to be able to strip down that thing called race and understand that we function just the same. The only thing that's different is the biological function of the hue of your skin versus mine. And so we're talking to leaders about look at people as humans. Let's strip away the titles, because with titles come power. With titles come superiority and inferiority types of relationships. We want the human to human relationship, which we think will make humans more productive in the workplace, which you should see that at the bottom line.
This exercise yesterday as we were prepping for the show, and it's interesting. I don't define myself as white. I mean, I define myself as Canadian, right? I grew up in Canada, moved to the States, and a father and a husband and so on. And it is so interesting as I talk to my friends, they do talk about the fact that, yeah, I am defined by the hue of my skin, and that dictates a lot of the ways I interact with people and the way I interact with authority and people at work and so on. So I think that's a great piece of advice to say, you got to strip that away and let's get back to just being human beings. Well, we always have such an interesting and international audience here. So let's go to Christy Lawrence at the Question Command Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Who's tuning in today, and have you got any good questions for us, Christy?
Oh my goodness, we have a global audience for sure. We've got Raffaella from Italy. We've got Pierina from Peru. We've got people from South Africa to South Carolina. It is a full house. Peru, Lagos, the Condo, Italy, on and on. So we have a gentleman from Texas, and his name is Brent, and he wants to know, Dr. Jackson, what do you tell people when they say to you, we just want things to get back to being normal? How would you help us understand that question?
I have a difficult time understanding what normal is, because what's normal for me may not be normal for someone else. My experiences, which I consider to be normal, are not normal experiences for everyone else. I'll give you an example. As an African-American male, I received the talk. The talk is, how do you engage with the police if you're pulled over? Some of my Caucasian friends never experienced the talk. And so for me, that's normal. For them, it's abnormal. And given the times that we're in with COVID-19 and, of course, the unrest because of the George Floyd, normal is out of the door. Change is normal, because the only real law of nature is change. And that's what we see all the time. You think about it. When you go to bed at night and you wake up the next day, there's something that's changed about your body. So that's the normal thing that happens. We have to be able to embrace change. We have to be able to also disrupt ourselves and create change. And ultimately, what we have to be able to do is transform ourselves as it is deemed we need to be transformed, given the environment in which we live, the ecology in which we live, and given the economy and how it's constantly changing all of the time.
Yeah, this idea of let's get back to the way things used to be. I mean, you really got to put that out of your head when you think about transformational thinking, don't you? That it is forward looking. We always change. It's the old adage, the only thing that's constant is change. Well, Christy's got another great question for us, so we're going to shoot it back to Christy, the Question Command Center. What do you got, Christy?
Yes. Swati is from India, and she wants to know, she said, in these times, organizations are changing terms of employment, they're downsizing. How do we deal with an organization's actions and view them in a positive light? How to transform ourselves when such changes, so that these changes don't affect you? And I'm thinking adversely.
That's a great question. And thank you for that question. What I'll say is this. I like to use this phrase as it relates to COVID-19 and all that's going on in the world. We're at the intersection of intellect and instinct. And being that we are at that intersection, the greatest tool that you have is counterintuitiveness. That means that you're not going to resort back to your old habits of, when you see change, you result back to that because it gives you comfort. See, comfort is always comfort is always what uncertainty and ambiguity seeks. And as a result of that, we have to be able to disrupt ourselves, transform ourselves, find out the necessary skill sets that we need, understand where the company is going, and get those skill sets so that we can remain competitive. This is not necessarily about competing necessarily with other companies. It's about competing with yourself. How can you become better each and every day as a human being?
Excellent. Sorry, I just choked on that. I'll tell you the thing that's really interesting to me, Terry, is you talk about organizations, and governments and police forces and so on. Really, where transformation can really happen is at the business level, right? What companies are doing to help their employees feel safe and so on. We got a great question. I want to go back to Christy really quick from a friend, Keith, who's actually got a transformational platform that talks about how do you change behavior. And he's got a great question for us. Christy, ask away.
I actually have two great questions. So Keith, what he wants to ask you, Dr. Jackson, he says, what do you tell a CEO who says our organization doesn't bring social issues into business? We keep them separate.
That is a great question, because each and every day, your employees deal with social issues. So are you saying that you're not concerned with the issues that your employees deal with on a day-to-day basis? Because those issues in and of themselves will impact what their productivity and their level of engagement are within organizations. If you're an empathetic, emotionally intelligent leader, you have to understand what is going on in the community that's impacting your employees, it's impacting your business. And so social statements are a part of what an organization does and should be. As a matter of fact, the organization should be a leader around social issues. You know, given COVID-19, with the social issues that we are facing today, if you are not embracing them, discussing them, and trying to solve them, you're probably going to end up on the wrong side of history as it comes to this, because we are at the tipping point where everybody is willing to engage around what is right for humanity. And that would include all the human beings that work within these organizations. So they're going to have to move forward and bring in those social issues, have consultants and coaches like myself and like Chester come in and have those tough conversations, because those tough conversations are going to make their employees feel more valued, which should result to greater productivity in the workplace.
You know, I love that. You've got to treat the whole human being right now, don't you? You can't just say, hey, leave your personal life at the door, because people are working from home. Your personal life is literally on the other side of that door, right? So you've got to address the whole human. You know, you and I are involved with a great platform called Pro Habits that actually little daily reminders about how to be more culturally sensitive, how to be, you know, more in tune to the lives of our employees and our coworkers. You know, there's a great question here, and I want to get to it from the UAE. And I'm not gonna say your name well here, but Farzna A, and I know I didn't say that right, asks, how can we take advantage of Black Lives Matter so that we can attract attention to other minorities who've been excluded from the community? And I'd love for you to address that, because the focus really is George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. It's Farzana. Thank you. Christy's helping me. Farzana. Black Lives Matter. And yet it can extend to other minorities as well, right? To the Hispanic community, to the Asian community, and Middle Eastern community as well, can't it?
It extends to everyone. It just so happens that in the U.S., the issues have been around Black lives and Black Lives Matter. But I'm going to say this, all lives do matter, right? And when I talk about breaking it down to human beings, that means that we're going to deal with the issues around gender as well. And so human beings all have the ability and the capacity to be productive. We have a tendency in some cultures to take a look at male versus female, and male being more dominant than female. But at the end of the day, we have to ensure that all human beings are making a contribution to the organization. So what we talk about is cultural change when you begin to take a look, ask about the UAE and some of the challenges that they may face. You know, culture, religion, they don't necessarily shift as quickly as maybe we'd like, but the mindset has to be such that if you want to be a top tier country, if you're looking to have the best productive culture and workforce, you have to consider everyone in transformation. And you have to consider that all lives matter, regardless of gender, regardless of race. And because it really comes down to being human. That's why I like to go back to connecting human beings to humanity so that we all can thrive.
Excellent. You know what's really interesting in this conversation is we're getting questions in the chat box. I mean, we think of Black Lives Matters. This is an American thing. This is a U.S. thing. And yet we're getting questions from the UAE. We're getting questions from Poland and Italy. In fact, Christy's got a couple of more, and I want to keep the conversation going. So let's go back to Christy in Atlanta and serve them up.
So Chris is from Poland, and Chris, he said, the point is to look inside us, inside our why, and sharpen our mindfulness. And people are just, so grateful to see you here, Dr. Jackson. Just a lot of, so glad you're here. Farzana says she lost her father to COVID-19 a couple of weeks ago, and she's feeling lonely because her family can't be together. And she just left a message on LinkedIn, was told that LinkedIn is not the right platform. Is this wrong? I'm an inclusive leader who takes energy from others. I'm curious about your thoughts on that.
You know, inclusivity is the key. And we have to understand why we haven't been as inclusive as a country and across the globe, because everyone has had their challenges. Every country's had their challenges with some type of discrimination or lack of inclusivity. Again, I go right back to stripping it down to the human being, right? That's how we came here. We're all born the same. When we ascend to another level, we all ascend the same. And the inclusivity is the key to the whole phrase of diversity and inclusion, because what people have to ask themselves in inclusivity is, what is it about me that provides or produces so much fear that doesn't allow me to include others into what I'm doing, my conversation, my organization? And that's rooted in fear, right? And power, or the lack of losing power. And oftentimes, I think of leadership, and leadership is code word for power, authority, and control. And so people in control want to maintain power, authority, and control. And that's a reason for the lack of inclusivity. And what we have to understand is, power is something that is given, and it's given through humility and respect. And we have to understand that to be inclusive means that we're going to provide better solutions for our clients and better solutions for society, because we're all proven to be intelligent beings if we're giving the opportunity. So the lack of inclusion, which is rooted in fear and power, is actually delusional, right? Because at the end of the day, we include people in things that we think they can make a contribution, and we exclude them for prideful reasons. And pride is another thing that we have to be able to deal with, and the ego and the super ego and all of that we have to deal with as it relates to the lack of inclusion that's happening across the globe.
Such great questions coming in. We've got Rafaela from India. We've got Mary from Kenya. By the way, Rafaela, forza l'Italia, forza l'azzurri. I lived in Italy for a little while. It's the greatest 2 years of my growing up. And yet it's really interesting that these are issues in Italy. They're issues in Kenya. And Christy, you've got a great question from Mary from Kenya. Let's ask that to the doctor here. I think it's really insightful.
Yes, Mary is in Kenya, and she wants to know how you balance or align a pandemic response action with transformational planning.
That is an excellent question. I'm going to use the analogy again of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. I think there are some questions you have to ask yourself. And as a caterpillar, you ask, what do we want to keep from before? The caterpillar then goes into a cocoon that becomes pretty much liquid. And in that process, it becomes a butterfly that flies out. And so when you're in the cocoon, you have to ask yourself, what are we learning that we want to keep? And when you become the butterfly through that process, which it is a metamorphosis, and that's what an organization has to do, what you have to ask yourself is, what are our wings? Where are our wings going to take us? And what does the future look like? So when you addressing the pandemic and the transformational planning, it's all about painting the picture for the future, knowing that the pandemic has created an environment that we can never return to who we were or what we were. And now it's totally future forward, and you have to create a future forward organization, even in the difference in its design, and could be the possibility, the difference in the types of products and services that you offer. So ask yourself those three questions, and they will help you begin to design the future of your organization.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Work and life are just completely blurred now. Yeah, I mean, they were before, and I think the pandemic really has brought it to the fore that you don't have a work life and a family life. You've got life. Rafaela says we have to create a change in life, work, and family. And more than anything, we all have to believe in it. And I think that belief factor is really so key. It's so interesting. We've got a couple more questions, and we're going to go a little long because we really think this is an important discussion. Good. So, Christy, I know they're piling up there. We're going to go back to you and your sweet tea to talk about some more of these really important issues.
Yes, it's such great questions. So, Bass from California says his organization has been supporting companies with digital transformations for 7 years now, and now is the time for companies and countries' transformation to be more inclusive. Do you have a framework that leaders need to understand to do that?
Yes, I'm an author of a book called Transformational Thinking. It's the first step for individual and organizational greatness. And in that, I talk about, there are several models. There are 3 decision models in there. And then there is a model to take a look at from a leadership perspective and from an organizational perspective around what I call the 11 P's of transformation. And those 11 P's serve as a model of everything that you have to examine within your organization in order to move to that next step, that higher level, and become a transformed organization. There are P's like perspective. There are P's like processes. There are P's like planning. And so all of those processes, those 11 P's, will lead you to a framework that will enable you to become a transformed organization and continue to be transformed as you continue to assess your state as an organization. It drives you forward for future transformation.
I love going back to what you said earlier. Look, you're now a butterfly. You got wings. Where do you want to go? We often say as coaches, right? We say, how do you want to be remembered? And I think this is a great time to be asking that question as you go through, how are we treating our employees? How are we treating our customers? How are we treating each other? This is an issue that's been around a long time, and you've been sensitive to it, of course, your whole life. It's kind of an awakening for a lot of people. And you said something to me yesterday that I want you to expound on. Because while it's an awakening for a lot of people, for you, you said, what took you so long to hear my cry? And I want you to just expound on that from your perspective for those of us that are kind of coming to this awakening when it's been your whole life.
That's interesting because, I remember the conversation. Of course, we were talking yesterday, and I said, well, if you look back into the 1950s and 1960s when African Americans or blacks were marching for equal rights and civil rights, you saw the police at that time, or law enforcement, abusing Dr. King, a man we see as a man of peace that we all love today. But 75% of all the people who lived during Dr. King's time hated him at the time, to include blacks. And so this is a march and a walk that I've been walking all of my life. And so this cry has been going out since the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. What took so long? Did it take a black man who had the knee of an officer on his neck to call out for his dead mother for you to hear the cry? Because the cry has been consistent and constant all of my life. So when I walk out into this world every day, I'm dealing with the same issues that George Floyd dealt with. I've been pulled over by the police the same way that George Floyd is, right? Had been pulled over. And so that cry has been consistent for a number of years. For decades, it's been consistent. And so I asked the question, what took you so long to hear this cry? Was it because COVID-19 stopped the world and you were paying attention to what actually one human being was doing to another human being? And at that point in time, with all that's happening, all people from races and ethnicities began to hit the streets because they saw something that was grossly wrong with how one human being was treating another human being.
Isn't it so interesting? And I just love the power of your words, Dr. Jackson, because, even what you've been through, and so many of our Black friends and African-American friends have been through, you're still so gracious and you're still so hopeful. And I think that's the message. It's taken us a long time to hear that cry. Now that we've heard it, let's do something about it. We
Yes.
love to wrap up, our session and say, look, what are three things? I love the rule of three. What are three things, three tips that you can give our listeners and people who have been involved in the conversation to help them be more transformational and deal with these such important issues today?
Well, thank you. The first one would be, let's get back to being human beings, right? Let's treat each other as human beings, because when we bring labels to the table, we're talking about relationships of inferiority and superiority. When we bring who we are as Terry and Chester, we're just bringing human beings to the table. So let's first get back to that. Then let's be true to ourselves, right? And what I mean by being true to yourself is be accountable for what you do or you don't do in your role and what's happening in the world today. Be true and understand that being true means doing the right thing. And third, and most important, just be authentic, right? You don't have to put on any airs, because I mentioned earlier, we all came here the same way. We're all going to leave the same way, right? So while we're experiencing what we're experiencing here, let's be true, let's be authentic, and let's be human.
Love it. Love it. Love the way you talk, Doctor. Hey, tell us a little bit about websites people can go to, where your book is available, where they can get more information about how to get involved with your incredible work.
Thank you. Thank you. My book can be found on Amazon. Again, the title is Transformational Thinking, the First Step Toward Individual and Organizational Greatness. I can be found on LinkedIn, Terrence Jackson, PhD. My website is jcgconsultinggroup.com. You can find me there. And I'm all over social media because I just love interacting with others, especially Chester here. And, it's always about trying to move the needle for humanity to become better. It's about gratitude, right? That's why I'm here today with the Apostle of Appreciation.
Well, we always love to ask our guests, so where did you find your gratitude today? # find your gratitude. So where did you find your gratitude today, Terry?
It's real simple. My gratitude was found when I opened my eyes and I was able to see another day.
I love that. You're saying, I woke up today. A lot of people didn't wake up. I'm one of the lucky ones.
A lot of people didn't wake up.
Sure appreciate it.
That's right.
Well, listen, always amazing to spend time with you. Love our time together. We're going to stay on because we're going to talk a little later. But, we always want to give a shout out to our sponsor at Harper Business Books that's always so gracious and helps us publish all our work. And we got a wonderful little commercial we love to share with our listeners and our viewers. Alan Mullally, the guy who saved Ford Motor Company, said, I love this book. And of course, the not so subtle call to action, buy me, buy me, buy me. If you want to listen to any of our past episodes, you can find them on methodsof.com, ours, as well as Marshall Goldsmith. If you're looking to do a production of any kind of stuff online like this, by all means, get a hold of the wonderful people at the Methods Network. They do a tremendous job. We want to give a shout out to the Queen of Questions at the Question Command Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Thanks so much, Christy, for filling in today. You were amazing. And as always, a shout out to the world's greatest online program producer, Brent Klein, coming to you live and in color from Austin, Texas. Hey, give us 30 minutes. We'll give you great information, great inspiration, and a roadmap to a life of gratitude. Next time we're going to welcome our good friend. I brought his book over here real quick. We're going to welcome to the show Jacob Morgan. He's going to talk to us about the future leader. Well, listen, I've been grateful for our time today. I hope through all of this that we're just a little more grateful. We're just a little more kind, and we're a little more patient. We're here every Tuesday and Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern time. Same bat time, same bat channel. Grateful for your time. Take care. Be safe. Have a wonderful day. Cheers.